but I do work at Principal, which is right down the street. Does everybody know where it's right across from Westlawn? Does anybody know anybody that works at Principal? There's about 500 people. Who do you know that works there?
Daryl, oh,
Okay. And do you know what she does there?
I'm not exactly, she takes calls.
Okay, so she's probably in the customer service area, or call center. Good. Well, while I worked there for a long time, and while I work at Principal, I don't go into the office very often because most of the time I'm working from home, and I'll talk more about that. So I'm going to talk about being a project manager because that's what my official role is. And so what is a project manager? I have a picture here, and it's cowboys herding cats, and that's what I feel like I am, is a cat herder. And the reason why is because when you're leading a project, you usually have a very diverse group of people trying to all get to the same goal, but they're all going in different directions because, you know, cats are very independent. They like to kind of do what they want to do. And so it can take them a long time to get everywhere and going the same direction. And so that's what I do as a project manager. That's one explanation we use. But the more technical explanation is that it's the person overall charge of the planning and execution of a particular project. We're change agents. We make project goals because every project, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, has their own goals. And they use their own skills and expertise to inspire a sense of shared purpose within a project team. And they enjoy the organized adrenaline of new challenges and the responsibility of driving business results. In other words, we connect the dots for everybody. That's why I have a picture there of connecting the dots, because we help everybody see when you're on this project, here's why you're on the project, here's what the company's going to get if you get it done. And so let's all work together to make it happen. So what is a project? Well, it can be a number of things, but it's usually temporary, and it can be long-term. It can take years to get done, or it can take 2-3 months to get done. It has a beginning, which is your idea, the middle, which is where you plan for how it's going to happen, and then the end when you deliver what it is that you are trying to achieve. It's unique, meaning that you don't do it all the time. It's a one-time deal. You have one goal in mind. Everybody on the team should have one goal. And when I say matrix resources, what that means is that you often have people working with you that come from all areas of the company. And so they normally don't work together, but they come together for this one project. So some examples of projects are building a house. That's a project, right? It's a one time. You have the goal of making a house for somebody to live in. You have plumbers and electricians and carpenters and tilers and people to draw the plan and people to shingle the roof, and they all have to come together and they all have to do things at the right time, because you can't put up drywall and then say, oops, I forgot the plumbing, I forgot the electrician, let's take the walls back down. That's not very efficient, right? So that's a project. Developing a new video game, software, anything to do with software, that's a project. Producing a new automobile, disaster recovery. So if we were to have a tornado in Grand Island and we needed to clean up, you would need a team of people that normally don't work together to recover the city, to clean it up, and so that would take a project. The Olympic opening ceremonies. How many of you last year watched the opening ceremonies for Rio? That is a project in itself. That's an example of one where you have to get down to the minute and the second to know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen in order for that show to come off seamlessly for those of us who watch it on TV. So, because you have to say this person goes first, and the stance is going to take 4.3 seconds. And so then this person comes, and this person comes. So that takes a very skilled project manager to get something like that on. Even a wedding can be a project. It's a one-time thing, right? There's lots to do plan for a wedding, or a graduation ceremony party if you have one. And even selecting a college can be a project, because you're probably going to be your own project manager when you get to that point, or maybe you're selecting a career, and you're going to have to get other people on your team to help you get the information so that you can make that decision. You're going to have to get funding. You're going to have to set a schedule to say, when do I want my decision made by? And you're going to have to decide what's in your scope, meaning what do I want in a college, or what do I want in a career. So just a little bit about how I got started in this. As I said, I worked at Principal. It's been a company since 1879. When it started off, it was actually called Bankers Life of Iowa. And it's a Fortune 500 company, which means that, I don't know if any of you read the Fortune magazine, but they every year do an annual review of the top 500 companies in the country, and we're one of them. We're global. We actually are getting to the point where we have more employees outside of the United States than we have inside now, which is big for us. We have offices in Hong Kong and Chile and China and Mexico, Brazil, London, Spain, and then several offices in India, in Pune and Mumbai. I didn't say that right, sorry. And the it's headquartered, as I said, in Des Moines, Iowa. That's where a large portion of our employees are. And that the people that I work with on projects, that's where they're at. So even though I live here in Grand Island, every day I'm working with my teammates in Des Moines, Iowa. And we've had the Grand Island office here in Grand Island for almost 35 years. At the end of December, it'll be 35 years. And there's 500 people that work out of the Grand Island office, but a lot of us work from home. So our office is kind of empty from day to day, but it does employ, and it's one of the few jobs like this in Grand Island, very white collar. We talked about there's customer service, call centers, underwriters. If you want to get life insurance, you have to fill out a statement of your health, and underwriters look at that and decide whether or not you're acceptable. We also have a large area here in Grand Island that handles pension plans and 401k plans. Do anybody know what those are? Those are what we're most known for in our company. That's what people who, when you work at a company, you can put money and start saving soon. I'll tell you that right now. As soon as you start working, start putting money away so that when you want to retire at 65, 70, whatever it may be, you have enough money to live on.
Wouldn't you get bored though?
Or if you get retired early,
Yeah.
oh, that's when you have your second career. So very few people actually stop working. They usually go on to something else.
Most teachers then start doing so.
Yeah. My employment, I've worked at the office for 34 and a half years. So I started a year after the office opened here in Grand Island. And I started off in a customer service area too, taking calls, and it was quite the experience for me because I grew up on a farm, by a small town north of here in Grand Island, and didn't have a lot of global or even national experience. And so the first customers I had to serve were in Los Angeles and New York City. So it was quite an eye-opener for me. And then my skills just naturally led me to do special project work. I didn't even know what a project manager was. We didn't really have that official title in our company, but they always needed somebody to help lead things, and that's just how I went. Even in high school and college, I was always kind of leading projects just by default. Might because I'm a little bossy, and you have to be bossy to be a project manager, but that ended up there. I have led teams of people, so I've been an HR director where you have to give feedback to people, tell them what they're doing good, tell them where they need to improve, decide what their salaries are going to be when they get promotions. And then I eventually have now become a project management professional because there's an actual industry for this. All right. So one of the questions was, did I know I was going to be a project manager when I was in high school? And the answer is no. I had no idea the job existed. I went to college for accounting. When I got done, I knew I wanted to work in an office. I knew I didn't want to be on the farm any longer. And so Principal was open, and it was one of the few offices in Grand Island, and I was lucky enough to get a job. And like I said, it just happened by chance that I fell into this career. And that's because I made sure that people understood what skills I could bring to the table. So that's one of the things I would tell you is that whatever job you're in, if you feel like you have a special talent or skill and it's not being utilized, make sure somebody knows about it. They're not going to guess it. You have to tell them that you have it. So what are some pros and cons of working for a Fortune 500 company? The pros, I would say, I get to work from home. I sit in my office and I look out on my street and I can be on a phone call with someone from India and Mexico and New York City and Des Moines and San Diego all at the same time, but yet I'm here in Grand Island. And just the fact that I don't have to drive into work all the time. I don't always have to dress like this for work. When I go to Des Moines or when I give presentations, I'll dress like this, but normally I can just be in some casual clothes. I have had a lot of opportunity to travel, to give presentations to different groups. And that's always fun because you get to see new parts of the United States. I haven't got to travel for business outside of the country yet. Not sure that I even really want to, but if I had the opportunity, I would do it. The pay is pretty good when you work for a global company. Flexibility, in my job, I'm like, somebody that takes calls, they don't have quite as much flexibility because they have to be there at a certain time of day in order to take those calls. I have the ability to start my day whenever I want to and to end it whenever I want to. And because sometimes I'm on calls with someone from Hong Kong, I have to adjust my schedule because 8 o'clock here at night is their daytime. And so maybe I'll start work at 10 o'clock in the morning because then at 8 o'clock at night I'm still on the phone. So the flexibility is great, and it allows me, that's why it allows me to be a board member for the Grand Island Public Schools too. Benefits are good when you work for a large company. You get excellent benefits usually. So your medical insurance, like we were talking about, your pension, your 401k. If you're a self-owned business, if you own your own business, you have to supply those things for yourself, and they're expensive. And so when you're in a larger company, there's economies of scale, meaning they can spread the cost across a lot of people and you get good benefits. So you have to make that decision for yourself. Variety, because of my job, being a project manager, every day is different. Even though I've worked for the company for 34 and a half years, it's never been the same. It's not monotonous or routine for me, so that's what I really like. And then the global experience, which I can talk about. But the cons are that you work for corporate America, and that's not always a good thing. Corporate America, they make decisions based on stockholders. We're a publicly traded company, and so you might invest in my company, you might give me $100, you might give me $100, and if I don't meet our financial goals, our stock goes down and you lose money, and you don't like that. So you're going to come to our board of directors and say, hey, you got to start picking things up here. Your stock price needs to rise. Well, often that means cutting staff because you have to cut expenses. And so back in 2008, which I know was a long time ago when there was the Great Recession, our company was one of them because we're financial. And most of anything that was traded on the stock exchange was going down. We had huge layoffs. In one fell swoop, 600 people were gone. Then later, another 400 people were gone. They cut our wages, and you don't have any control over that. You're kind of removed from that decision making. It's all made by someone else. And so that's part of the problem with corporate America. And sometimes finding meaningful work. So I know it's important for people to have life insurance. If you have an unexpected death in your family, if you have life insurance, that means you get money to help you cover expenses and then also make up for that person's lost income. So that's a good thing. And even pension, that's a good thing to allow people to retire. But yet at the same time, it's a little hard for me. I'm removed from the customers. And so to find meaning in my work is sometimes a challenge. And like teachers, every day she can look at you and know that she's making a difference in your lives. Or like a doctor or a police officer and stuff. So that's part of the problem too. Lack of control, you're not your own boss. So here's that pro and con you have to think about when you're making decisions for yourself. If you own your own business, you get to control all the decisions. You get to decide what you do and when. But then you also have a lot more risk that ride on you. And if you work for corporate America, you don't have as much of the risk, but then you also don't have the decision making either. So you have to decide that. I talked about the shareholder expectations and then just finding the value in your work. So if you wanted to be a project manager, what would you need to do with regards to education and skills? A bachelor's degree is preferred, but it's not required. If you don't have a bachelor's degree, they usually want you to have a lot of experience or time in the job before they would make you a project manager. So someone with a bachelor's degree might be able to go into a company and within a year or two leading projects. If you didn't have the bachelor's degree, you may have to be there for 8, 10 years. There is a Project Management Institute certification. So Project Management Institute is a worldwide organization made up of project managers. There's very strict qualification. You have to take a very detailed test, and then you have to keep your certification up. Each year you have to put in so many learning hours, so it's a continual learning. And so that's a good thing to have too. So the type of skills you need for this job is you need to be a servant leader. And that's probably the most important. And what that means is that even though you're leading the project, you're asking people to do things by this day, you're helping them figure out what they need to do, you also have to serve them. You have to make their jobs easier. You have to take minutes of meetings so that they can go back and remember what was decided. You have to make sure they have all the equipment they need to do their jobs. And if they have roadblocks, like meaning somebody's impeding their progress, they can't get something done because of it, you have to make sure that that gets out of their way so that they can keep moving. You have to be very organized, especially with people who are really, really good at software development. Their minds think very differently than mine. So they just want to create this software, and they want to know about this programming, and they like to play around with new programming, but they don't always like to stay on task. And so that's where I come in as being organized to say, you know, that's great, you want to try that out, but if we do, we're going to miss our deadlines, and that's really important. So that's what a project manager can bring. Strategic, and what that means is you have to be able to think ahead, see ahead. It's those connecting the dots. You have to be able to tell someone, if you, like I said earlier, if you put up this drywall today, I know you want to get this done and out of the way, but you have to understand we haven't put the plumbing in yet. I'm going to have to tear that plumbing out, or that drywall out, so you can put the plumbing in. So you have to be able to see that strategically what's going to happen. If somebody takes this action, what's the reaction going to be? And you have to help the team see that too. You do have to have strong leadership skills. You're usually leading people that don't report to you, which means that they're from another area. So I really don't have a lot of control over them. I can't decide if that person gets a raise. I can't decide if they get fired or if they get disciplined for something. So I have to lead them by example and just by encouraging them and helping them see the big picture, because I really don't have any control over them. Communicator is a really big one. Again, people who do application development or software engineering speak a very different language than the business who wants the end product. And so I help interpret that. Sometimes it's almost like they're speaking foreign languages, and I have to help them. Paraphrasing is really good, stating things back, you know, restating things to say, okay, this is all that we agreed on. Have to be adaptable. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit in a lot more detail. My job has changed so much in 34 and a half years. I now work with people that weren't even born when I started working at Principal. So they obviously think a lot differently. They have a lot more different skill sets than I do. So I have to adapt to meet them. You have to take initiative. You can't be told what to do exactly all the time. You have to figure out what needs to happen first. You have to take this mass, you know, when you first get a project, it's just a jumbled mess, and you have to somehow organize it yourself. No one's going to tell you how to do that. And then you have to be influential. And that's with people that are above you, people below you, people that are your peers. You have to be able to influence them, be respected as someone who knows what you're talking about, so that you can get them to do what they need to. So, experience, the different types of projects I've worked on. This is another fun thing about being a project manager, because I get to be on in a lot of projects that are top secret. A lot of times we have names for the projects because nobody in the company, other than those of us who are working on it, can know about them until we're ready to deliver. So that's kind of fun here to be on the cutting edge. But some of them that might mean something to you, and I'll see if hopefully this will come up, if not. But we recently redesigned our company's website. It had been the same website for like 15 years. And you would think that it wouldn't take very long to redesign a website. It took us a year and a half. It took a long time. But this is what our new website looks like. We recently, a year ago, you can see up here that where it says Principal. If you ever drove by our building or you ever saw it, it was always in the shape of a triangle. It was very sharp edges. A year ago, we rebranded our company. And part of that was because we are global. And a triangular shape with very sharp edges is very offensive in some cultures. Like in Hong Kong, it's very offensive to them. So because we're becoming such more of a global company, we wanted to rebrand our image. And so that's why the P was changed to something that's very circular, represents the globe, represents everybody working together. The blues are not the harsh navy color, I guess. They're more, beachy blue colors is how I would put them. And we talk about how we're one principle. So regardless of where we are in the world, we're trying to be one principle. So that, and we put pictures of people out on our website to make it seem more friendly. Here's this is a cool tool that is unique to our company. We have this copyrighted. If you are thinking about, say you get a new job and you want to start saving for your retirement, you can put in your age, what you make, how much money you're going to put into your savings each paycheck, and then it'll tell you whether or not you'll be able to retire when you want to, and if you're saving enough or not saving enough. So that's a cool tool. So there's a lot you can drill down, obviously, into this, but just more pictures of people and stuff. So that was one of the big projects I did. We also, right now, we have an intranet, so just the employees get to see it. We're changing that. I can't really show you anything on that yet, but we're trying to change that to make it look a lot like our external one. In 2010, I used to work in the medical division, so we used to sell medical insurance, and that's still very much in the news right now. We decided to exit that business because it was very difficult to be profitable in that business. And that was the first time that I really had to adapt in my career because I had been in the health division since I started. And so now all of a sudden my job was eliminated along with 1,500 other people. So one of the things that I had done a few years before that, there were some states that we had decided to no longer sell insurance in. And we had to, when you decide to stop selling medical insurance, you can't just say, okay, I'm terminating your policy today and yours tomorrow. You have to give them 12 to 18 months lead time. So it's a very extensive process. So I had to help with that before 2010. And so when we got to 2010 and the decision was made, we're going to get out of the medical business, we had a lot of new leaders who didn't realize that we were going to have to take this 12 to 18 month path to get out of the business. They thought we could just be out of it just like that. So I raised my hand and I talked to a lot of the senior leaders and said, hey, there's this process we need to go through. Here's what you need to do. And so quickly, they recognized me as an expert. So I adapted. I made sure I still had value to the company and made sure they knew what I could do. So that was probably one of my most rewarding projects to work on. Even though it meant that I was eliminating my job and jobs for a lot of other people, I also bought myself 3 to 4 years of the company because it took that long, and then I was able to move on to another part of the country or the company. So that's what I'm talking about when you have to adapt. Healthcare reform, it started in the 1990s. It's been a problem for a long time. And I've always worked on projects with that. I talked about our new brand and our global communication. When we did roll out our new brand that I showed you, I know this sounds weird, but a lot of the employees across the world worked at companies that we bought. And so they had their own system infrastructure. They had their own way of communicating. We had no way. Our intranet today that are for employees is only for U.S. employees. We can't talk to our non-U.S. employees using that intranet. So when we rolled out our brand, we had to find a way to globally communicate at the same time the changes that were happening. So that was pretty exciting. And then FAFTA. This is a finance bill that the U.S. government passed. And what happens is sometimes very rich people and very rich corporations try to hide some of their money offshore, Cayman Islands or other countries, so that they don't get taxed on it. And so a few years ago, in like 2011, 2012, the federal government passed a law that said, no, you can't do that. You have to report that money and you have to pay taxes on it. Because the United States was losing billions and billions of tax revenue because people were doing this. So that was a very, of all the projects I've worked on, that was probably the most frustrating and difficult project because it required talking to all these non-US offices and So the communication or the language barrier was there. And then also they had their own government regulations that didn't mesh with the United States. So the United States was trying to tell other governments, no, you're going to do this. And so we didn't make it very far. And I think they're still actually working on that. I got reassigned to something else and I was kind of glad about that because that one was a difficult one because there's so much outside of our control on the project and that makes it hard. Okay. So for my years, what have I learned? Lessons learned on the job that you can apply to anything. You cannot communicate enough. Don't expect that people know what you know. Don't expect that people understand things the same way you do. Just talk about it. It is amazing to me still how people just don't, communication is so hard for people. Just if you don't know something, ask, or if you think somebody doesn't understand, explain it again. It's the most important thing you can do in any of your jobs. The adapt. I talked about that a little bit. I gave an example. I'm going to give you a couple more here in a minute. Find ways to create your own personal value. I talked about that. Make sure you raise your hand when you have a skill, and make sure people know it. And curiosity. We've heard statistics that like 40% of the jobs that you may fill when you finally have your career don't even exist yet today. We don't even know what's out there. We don't know what jobs are going to go away. So just be curious about everything. Read what you can. Just listen to people. Talk to people who are very different from you. Even if you don't think you have anything in common, talk to them because you'll never know when you find that next best idea for yourself personally. Do what you love. That's the main thing if you can. But if you can't do what you love, be sure you love why you do it. So why do I work? I work because I want to give I want to help my kids pay for college. I want to give my family a good life. I want to put food on the table. If you can't do what you love, just find a way to love it while you're doing it. And then make sure that you always have other interests, hobbies, and volunteers. Don't get so tied up in your job that you forget to have other things in your life. Because you never know when a job might go away. Another example of adapting I just wanted to quickly share with you is the technology changes. So when I started in 1984, we had dummy terminals at our desk. And what that meant was they were not personal computers. They couldn't do anything. If I typed out a form, it would have to go through a phone line back to Des Moines, and then a big, huge computer that probably filled the size of this room would compute all that information. And then the next morning, I could see what I did in the system, which is where today, if you do something like that, you instantly see the change you've made. So that's why they were called dummy terminals. They could do nothing on their own. There was no intranet. We had what we called screen messages. We didn't have emails. They didn't exist yet then. And so we would do a screen message. So if I wanted to talk to somebody in Grand Island who was on the other side of the wall, I'd type a message. Overnight, it would go through the phone line Des Moines back to Grand Island, and the next morning it would be printed off and hand delivered to that person. And we thought that was the coolest thing ever, rather than just getting up and walking and talking to them. So then we finally did get emails in the late 80s. It was called EMC2 squared. It was very crude compared to what we have today. We had no mobile phones, obviously. We had to dictate our letters into a little cassette. I don't even know if you guys know what cassettes are anymore. We had to dictate our letters and then give that cassette tape to a secretary and she would type it up for us. Fax was new. That was pretty popular back then. And we had conference calls, but we had no ability to see each other. And the calls were never very good quality. So I did a lot more traveling in the early part of my career just because it was so hard to have meetings virtually. And so then you look at today, we have personal computers, we have laptops. I can work from anywhere. I have, company emails on my phone. I'm basically working right now on here. We have the web and the Wi-Fi. Mobile phones obviously make a huge difference. Emails, which are actually no longer in fashion. As we're redoing our company's intranet, they're telling us we should no longer do emails. We should only communicate through like instant messaging or through working out loud type documents, like Google Docs is a working out loud type thing. You can all be working on the same one at the same time. And then conference calls. So we don't have the technology here in Grand Island yet, but in Des Moines, they have the technology where there's a camera that sits on the table, and say we're all in one room, and then somebody else is listening to us. That camera takes a 360-degree view, and so that person who's watching us can see every one of us at the same time. Just very, very cool technology that's made our jobs a lot easier.
I don't know if that's super cool or super creepy.
It's kind of creepy, before you said, are you live streaming yet? The one thing I would tell you is always assume you're on video. Always assume you're being recorded, because you probably are. I had a senior vice president came out here one time to Grand Island, and it was probably like 1997-ish, somewhere around there. And I remember talking to him about, that's just when the internet was really starting to get popular, and emails, and I was talking to him saying, yeah, it's a little overwhelming. It was very hard to search for things on the internet, and you could just get lost in it. And I was just like, I just don't know. People talk about surfing on the web, and I get so confused. And he's like, oh, that'll never last. That'll be gone in a heartbeat. Well, he wasn't very astute, was he? He wasn't a senior vice president for very much longer. So that's the other thing about adapting, is make sure you never think something's not going to happen. Because you even think about like Blockbuster. When you used to rent videos and DVDs, they were given the opportunity to work with Netflix because of live streaming, and they turned it down because they didn't think that was going to be a thing. Well, who's still here and who's not? You have to be aware of the things that are going to change. I won't go into a lot of detail of this, but this last year I had another big change in my career. Project management has always used what we call a waterfall cycle methodology. You have an idea, you work up your requirements, you design it, you develop it, you test it, and then you show it to the business. And you hope that you hit the mark and that you delivered what they wanted. And that can take months to do. So if you get to the end of it and you say to the business, here it is, ta-da, here's this wonderful thing, and they're like, that's not what I wanted at all. Then you have to go back and redo everything. So there's this new type of methodology called the Agile cycle, and what it does is it's supposed to just kind of be circular. And so you go with sprints, and they're usually 2 weeks long. So a developer develops something, and then they show a demonstration to business and say, okay, here's what I think you want in this application, or here's what I think you want on your intranet. And the business person has the opportunity to say, yep, you hit the mark, I really like it. Or they can say, no, that's not at all what I wanted. So then they go back and redo it. But you've only been there for 2 weeks as opposed to months and months. So what happened is our company decided to go with Agile. And in the Agile methodology, there's really truly not a true project manager role, even though it's still needed. So my job, I had a department of like 50 people in Des Moines. Half of us were laid off. And I was lucky I wasn't laid off, but I also didn't know where I fit into the new world anymore. And so the past year, I've kind of been working on where do I fit, where can I add value. It was a little bit harder this time than back in 2010 when I told you about how I was able to say, here's the value I can provide you. But I think I'm there now. I'm leading some very big complex projects again, because I think they've recognized that you still need that skill to help you out in this new Agile cycle, but it's taken a while and it's been difficult. And that's going to happen in your jobs. No matter what you do, you may think you're set, you like it, you're happy where you're at, and then somebody's going to come along and tell you, no, sorry, you got to change. So just be ready for that. And that's why you have to adapt and be creative and figure it out. And then the other interests and hobbies I told you was very important to have, because you can never take your job so seriously. You have to have other parts of your life going really well too. And these are just a few of mine. The BOE up there is the Board of Education. That's one I really enjoyed, because I knew children always had a soft spot in my heart and helping them out. But I knew I didn't have the skill sets to be a good teacher. I'm just not patient enough. And so I've always looked for ways to volunteer. So I volunteered for Big Brothers Big Sisters. I volunteered for United Way, mostly because of children. And then for the last 10.5 years, I've been on the Board of Education, which technically isn't volunteering. It's an elected position, but you don't get paid. And so to me, it feels like volunteering. But because the school district belongs to the community, your parents pay taxes. That's why you're able to go to school here for free. there's a Board of Education that represents the community that helps make decisions, especially with budget decisions for the district. And that's what I do as part of there's 8 other members on that Board of Education. But music, I like that, reading, again, these are things to keep your curiosity up and to make you a more well-rounded person. So that if anything changes in your career, you always have the opportunity to do something else. So I've talked enough, and I'll see if you have any questions. My question for you was it interesting enough or not? That's it. So any questions? I covered everything. I know I talked really fast, I apologize.
What are your day-to-day duties?
My day-to-day duties are basically never the same. It's just kind of driven by, like right now I have 5 different projects that I'm leading. And so it depends upon where the project is. So maybe I have a day full of meetings, and so I'm on the phone a lot. Sometimes I may have to actually create some documents, like maybe I have to give a presentation to our financial officers to get approval, so I'll work on creating documents. Sometimes it's just answering calls because people may have questions about a project and I gotta tell them where they're at. I may be spending time tracking down people, which is a little bit harder when you're virtual, but there's ways to do it. You can, with their instant message, you can see who's online and who's available, and so you track them down. And so it really every day is different, which is what I like. I start off with a to-do list every day, but it quickly changes and I have to adapt and still get things done. Good question. Anything else?
How did you get to your level? Where did you start?
It's a good question too. When the Grand Island office opened, obviously there was nobody working here, and so every 3 months they would add a group of about 10 to 12 people. And so by the time I started, I think I was maybe like employee 35 here in Grand Island. And because we were still growing the office, those of us who started at principal really early like that were kind of just forced into leadership positions, basically because there was nobody else there. So at a very young age, we all started to become team leaders, and then they called them coordinators, and then managers and stuff. And so I was very fortunate because I started at the bottom and we just grew so fast. And so that was kind of nice because sometimes, like then once our office got full and we had people in the leadership position, there wasn't a lot of people that could get promoted anymore. Until someone left or somebody changed the job or whatever. So that's how I got started, and I've always felt very fortunate for that. Because sometimes when you force somebody to do something, even if you don't think they're ready, they raise to the occasion. And I think sometimes that's almost the best way to give somebody a promotion, is just show that they can do it. And then when healthcare reform started to be a thing in the 90s, that's where, again, just because of my organization skills and being able to lead projects, I moved into that. So I was no longer leading a team of people, but I was leading projects, and then I just kept rising through the ranks that way. So, thank you for your question. Any other questions?
I like what you said, never think something's not gonna happen.
Yeah. That's right. So, well, good luck. I hope as I'm excited for you guys because I know you've probably heard a little bit about the prep academies that we're hoping to move to, and you guys will kind of be on the ground floor of that. You won't get the full benefits of it because, you're a freshman already, but you'll be part of it. And I'm excited for you because I think it'll be, I hope it's very beneficial to you and that it helps you find more connection to school. So anxious to see what you think about it in a couple of years. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, can we do a 3-on-3? I'll count to 3 and clap 3 times, okay?
Sure.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you very much. That's nice.
Where's my only clap?
Do you have a whole picture?
I can count. My hand.